It has been a busy news week. We are going to focus specifically on a couple stories, just because otherwise there's just too much. So let's talk first about public health. Let's talk about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The CDC and the FDA announced this week the vaccinations of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine should pause in all the different states, and every single state agreed to do it. This was after 6 recipients out of about a little shy of 7 million, 6.8 million people, emerged with a rare blood clotting disorder. All 6 of them were women between the ages of 18 and 48, and all of them developed these blood clotting problems within 1 to 3 weeks after getting the vaccine. So yesterday, Alyssa, I was seeing all these hot takes about vaccine hesitancy and whether or not this made sense. And I just wonder what your less hot take is, your warm take at a temperature that's able to consume.
My toasty take? Well, first, my first thought was my mom got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and she was a hesitant person, and I was waiting for her text because I thought she was going to be like, I told you there'd be something wrong with it. But luckily she didn't, because even my mom was like, 6 out of like 7 million? Like, okay. Look, we came out of 4 years of 0% transparency, right? And so I appreciate the transparency in this. 6 out of almost 7 million, I think, is 0.00009% if we round up of people affected by this. So, you know, I feel terrible for the people who have been affected by it, but I mean, it seems pretty safely low.
Yeah, and it seems like the federal government's line here is that the reason that they paused it and they were transparent about it is because they want people to be confident in the vaccine. Like, if they're pausing it just because of this, then, you know, they're not hiding anything. They're not trying to sweep anything under the rug. They're being very, like you said, transparent. But, you know, after this news broke, a lot of people brought up a couple of other things that risk that comes with certain medical procedures. And one of the things that people brought up a lot was like risks associated with just being a person that has female reproductive parts who is trying to live their life in some way. Birth control, for example, can I think 1 in 1,000 users of birth control will have a clotting incident within this year. It's like not a common thing, but 1 in 1,000 is a lot more than 1 in a million.
Correct. By many factors.
By many you know what? When I was in high school, I was like, I'm never using math again, but here I am using math. You know, another thing is pregnancy. Pregnancy can cause a person to be much more inclined to clotting disorders. I think it's 1 in 40 to 1 in 60 women who have a baby have some sort of issue with blood clotting. That's a lot. You know, that's a lot of risk that a lot of people are expected to take on. And, you know, I was thinking about this yesterday, you know, of the people that, you know, I didn't see anybody prominent come out and say that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was unsafe and I told you so or anything like that. Not with these numbers, but I'm imagining the type of person who would do that. And I think that they're also the type of person who think that when a woman becomes pregnant, she should just have the baby and not have an option.
I agree. I also feel like they're maybe the same people who, when bills for funding, research about things that might impact women come across their desk, are like, why? I've been obsessed with this one fact for a while. But do you know that women in America enter menopause earlier than, say, women in Asia and Europe?
I didn't know that. Why is that?
Well, Erin, no one fucking does any research to figure out why. There are lots of theories. And when we were getting ready for this episode, it's something I had been told by my doctor, and he gave me things to avoid, right? Like parabens. Our products have more parabens, women's lotion, makeup, shampoos, because they tend to make things more stable on the shelf. So ours have more parabens. Products in Asia and Europe don't have as many parabens. has there been a ton of research done about parabens? No, I found one article from 2015 that was like, we found these things in either breast tissue or what, but like that's kind of where it ended. And we can't say that it causes these triggers, but we can't say that it doesn't.
Yeah, and to build on that, I wish that this same abundance of caution that we're displaying for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which I've been reading is going to possibly halt the distribution of the J&J vaccine by just a few days. It's not going to be like catastrophic. It's just going to be mildly inconvenient for less than a week, hopefully.
Which is good.
Yeah, which is good. But I wish that the same abundance of caution were shown for things like chemicals that stay in people's bodies forever.
Right.
Like chemicals that are used to manufacture Teflon that can cause serious birth defects. Like why is that not something that is paused out of an abundance of caution? Like why is industrial waste not regulated with an abundance of caution? I think that I am glad, again, that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is being treated as something that requires public trust. But I think if people really took a second to think about all of the risk that we are exposed to every day, doing things like taking birth control, having a baby, not having a baby, drinking water, going outside and breathing the air, like I just wish that we were more cautious about those things.
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, and I also want to add that on Tuesday, the White House announced that April 11th to the 17th of this year is Black Maternal Health Week. America has an egregiously high rate of Black maternal mortality, and people have been researching it, and they don't know why exactly it happens. Some of it has to do with systemic racism in the healthcare industry, and some of it has to do with environmental racism of places that Black women live and what the water they drink and the air they breathe. And so I'm glad that the White House is emphasizing Black maternal health. I also want to add that there's a bill in Congress called the Black Maternal Health Momnibus, which
is cute.
It's cute.
Catchy.
I love the wordplay. It addresses the crisis, and it will direct the Department of Health and Human Services to address maternal health outcomes among minority populations. And that's something that we need to have passed.
Yeah, I really think it's about time.
I think that's pretty important because, like, the numbers are truly egregious and tragic and really unbefitting of a country that thinks that it's the best at anything. So if you want this passed, you should call your congressperson and let them know you want them to support the bill. The number for the switchboard is 202-224-3121. I think I almost have that memorized.
Isn't it on a shirt we have?
It is on a shirt. It is on a shirt we have. People who have been around me should also have that number memorized. Okay, I want to talk about one more quick thing. This week, Fox News host Jesse Watters, one of the most annoying men in America. Truly deeply irritating person. Everything about him is obnoxious. But he is a new dad, which is not inherently obnoxious. I wish the best for that child. He's been on paternity leave from his job co-anchoring The Five at Fox, one of Fox News' least watchable shows, which says a lot. But he called it on Fox News to say that he is now pro-paternity leave. He used to mock people for taking paternity leave. He used to think it was a big ruse, but now he wishes he could take 6 weeks. Now, Jesse Watters isn't the only conservative who has decided that something is good when it affects them personally. Mitch McConnell has come out in support of an agreement on an anti-Asian American hate crime bill. He wants to get the bill through the Senate because, quote, as a proud husband of an Asian American woman, I think this discrimination against Asian Americans is a real problem. No, thank you, Mitch, for being on the right side of history here. But like, could you use your imagination to think about it as a real problem if you weren't married to an Asian person?
You know what the GOP through line here is that like they don't give anyone the benefit of the doubt. They think that anybody who is flagging a problem, who is saying, hey, we should do this, is like a grifter or someone who's got like working an angle, and until it affects them personally, they think it's some sort of like fraud. It's actually one of their most disgusting characteristics.
Yeah, it's a real tell on yourself move. Like if you can't imagine the humanity of someone else until it happens to you. Now, I want to draw like a little bit of a distinction here because when Meghan McCain said that she was in favor of maternity leave, I think we said like, yeah, you know, however we can get people on our side, we want people on our side. I think there's a difference between Meghan McCain and Jesse Waters here. And here's what it is. Meghan McCain was allowed to take maternity leave. And when she was taking it, she was thinking about all the women who can't. And then she came back to the show and she said, all women should be able to do what I did. Yes. So it wasn't like, let's do this because I need it. It was like, I had it. I see now how important it is. Let's make it a cause of the View to try to get this for all women. And, you know, again, I'm not going to say everything that Meghan McCain has said about maternity leave is something I agree with, but I think it's a little bit different than Jesse Waters, who's like, I used to think those guys were fucking whips, and now I think it's fine.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like, way to go, guys. Mitch. Here's the other thing. Is it like Mitch McConnell, like we all know that Elaine Chao is of Asian descent, but he literally had to like say it out loud. Like, I am doing this because my wife is Asian and therefore hate crimes are terrible. Were they not terrible? If you're like when you say it out loud, don't you even, like, it's proof that there's no mechanism in their brain that actually functions. Because if they did, they'd be like, you know what? I don't have to say that part out loud. Right.
You don't need to ASA everything.
Yes.
You know,
that's exactly.
Like, you can leave the ASA out. I also think the flip side of that is that there's a widespread assumption on the right that unless something impacts you personally, you won't, like, people won't care. So like they don't care unless something impacts them personally, ergo nobody will care unless it impacts them personally. And I have a theory that is why some of their pet issues to get their base fired up are things that really tragically affect a relatively small number of people because they expect that everybody else will just let those people get thrown under the bus. Here's an example. 20-week abortion bans. 20-week abortions are very rare. They affect relatively few people compared to the number of abortions overall in this country. But Republicans love attacking it because I feel like the undercurrent is, well, who cares? You know, it's probably not going to affect you. You know, it's right. Can't you just get on board? It's probably not going to affect you. Same thing with the stuff about gender affirming treatment for trans kids. Now, compared to the U.S. population overall, there's not that many kids who are trans. And so I think the people on the right feel like they can go ahead and beat up on that population because who is actually personally affected?
Right. Well, also, like, do you think that old Jesse Waters thinks that the employees at the Bessemer plant, the Amazon plant in Alabama, deserve paternity leave?
No.
Or just his co-hosts?
I think that what he imagines paternity leave for is people who would also be used in a police lineup alongside Jesse Waters. You know?
Yes.
Kind of like cheesy, prematurely elderly white men, I think, is sort of what he wants. But that's a catty thing for me to say, but I don't care. Meow. Okay. So I'm sure this is not going to be the first time we talk about this, but we just want to put a stake in the ground and be like, we noticed this, guys.
We saw you.
We see you. And again, we'll take people on the right side of history, but also, can you please just like use your thinking caps a little bit to try to turn up the empathy? Okay. On to toasts and roast. We just have one toast this week. And this is a pretty serious one. I want to toast the men, women, and children who have testified at Derek Chauvin's trial. I'm not going to name the people who were children just because that's just my personal preference. There were 3 teenage girls and 1 9-year-old who witnessed Derek Chauvin murder George Floyd, who testified during the trial. The teenage girls, like, being in a trial is scary.
Like, that's the thing we can't even imagine because we've certainly not had to do it. And they just, I mean, I can't imagine knowing, first of all, what they witnessed and then having to relive it in that atmosphere, you know? And knowing that if they didn't, it could mean that he goes free, right? Like, that's what they have to know. And that's pretty fucking wild.
And, you know, it's not even just being on the stand. It's like sitting down with the attorney and reliving it with the attorney. It's like preparing for the trial. It's the media attention, and that's so much to ask of people who are just children when this happened. And I just think that those kids are so brave. I also want to compliment and toast Genevieve Hansen, who is an off-duty EMT who was not taking it at all from the defense attorney, so much so that she got reprimanded by the judge.
Do not argue with the court. Do not argue with counsel. Answer the questions. Do not volunteer information that is not requested.
I really love Genevieve Hansen's spirit here. I love that she just took no shit. And so she was great. Also, Felonious Floyd, George Floyd's brother, he took the stand earlier this week, and his testimony was really heartbreaking. And it was obviously really emotionally difficult for him to be up there. And I cannot imagine the strength it took for him to do that.
No, and I was very interested too in how it was explained. I think having him testified is called something like a spark of life testimony, which is meant to paint the person who is deceased as a human being and all the life that has lived and how much he will be missed. And watching him endure that on national television, having to look at Derek Chauvin is it's more than I think either of us could have managed.
Yeah. And so, toast to all those people who, and also, I read a lot of those people who testified, the experts who testified for the prosecution. A lot of them didn't take payment. And normally an expert witness gets a ton of money for being an expert witness. And a lot of them just did it I think they all did it on their own free will.
They did. And when you look at it, I mean, the fact that like the pulmonologist, Dr. Tobin, I think he testified for something like 7 hours straight. That's, and he and was asked about whether he was being paid, and he said, "I didn't think it was right."
Yeah, so toast to all those people. That takes a lot. We are welcoming back organizer, journalist, labor columnist, and the workers' friend, Kim Kelly, in a new segment we're calling Wait, What Happened? So, Kim, the last time we had you on, you explained the significance of the Amazon union vote. Results of that vote came in last week. So, Kim, wait, what happened?
It's a whole thing. There are some shades of the last election in a way where it took a while to figure out what was going on. A lot of people aren't happy, but eventually it's going to work out. So the votes came in. This was a mail-in election. The NLRB had to count everything. It took like a week and a half to get there, right? Because first, there were all these challenge ballots to deal with. The employer, Amazon, and the union are able to challenge ballots for whatever reason. Usually it's like, the signature was wrong, or, this was folded weird, like very small, silly things. But whatever, for some reason, that's part of it. A lot of challenge ballots. We finally got to the public counting point where a lot of people were watching on Zoom, and it was just like this torturous hours-long ordeal where they're like, yes, no, putting paper ballots in bins. That all happened. And eventually what shook out was the vote count did not go in the union's favor. It was like the official recording was like 1,700 something to 700 something. And now I will say that I know for a fact that a lot of the challenge ballots, about 400 of those, they were yes votes. So it still wasn't a win, but it was a lot closer than it might have seemed on paper if you're watching the New York Times tracker. So so they didn't win this round, but the union is planning to mount legal challenges there because they're very certain, and so are a lot of people who've been following along, that Amazon broke the law with their union busting campaign. So it's the first chapter is closed, but now there's going to be legal challenges. They're going to be rerunning the election. They're not backing down, essentially. So it wasn't the clean victory that a lot of us were hoping for, but it's not, they didn't get crushed. They just got hit with a pretty big setback.
For the workers who voted against the union, why do you think they did that? What was at play?
Man, Amazon is very good at what they do. We know that. And when they decided to launch a probably multi-million-dollar anti-union campaign at this one warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama, they had every resource imaginable. They hired, $3,200 a day anti-union consultants to hold these captive audience anti-union meetings that workers got pulled into for weeks on end. This was before the union was really even able to make headway there because they weren't allowed on the company property. They were usually in a union organizing campaign. You have meetings, you bring people together. We're in the middle of a pandemic. So the workers weren't comfortable with that. So all the union meetings were much smaller, like 10 people at a time for safety. And while that was all happening, Amazon had access to people 24 hours a day. They were sending them text messages. They were calling them. They're hounding them on the floor. They were pulling them into these meetings. And essentially, Amazon got a head start and they hammered home all their anti-union points. They scared people. They lied to them and told them, you'll lose your benefits. Maybe we'll shut down the warehouse. The union just wants your money. They're a chicken plant union. They can't do anything for you. They just used every tool in their arsenal, and they created a few more, like messing with the traffic lights or installing this illegal mailbox in front of the facility. It was a David and Goliath fight, and Goliath is pretty fucking big. He's got a lot of fucking, to follow that analogy, if you're going up against a giant with a sling full of stones, and meanwhile they're like the richest company ever and can hire endless amounts of people to bust your union. Like it's hard. It's an uphill battle. And this is something we're used to seeing when you go up against these massive corporations. We're used to seeing this in under-resourced parts of the South. It wasn't a huge surprise. Of course, it was heartbreaking, but labor organizers and pundits who have been watching are like, well, yeah, we kind of thought that would happen, but we really hoped it wouldn't.
Mm-hmm. So, are there any encouraging signs to be taken from the Amazon union vote? And what are some lessons that the labor movement can get from this vote? And then also just an individual that's listening that might be at a workplace that is going through a union drive. Like, what's encouraging and what are the takeaways?
Right. I think it's huge. They even, they've already made history. They've captured so much attention, gotten so much momentum. And, for people in this country, we don't necessarily talk about unions as much as we should because union density is so low, because Reagan and his buddies crushed it decades ago. The fact that this was one of the biggest stories in the country and that people were paying attention, they were tuning in. They're not only seeing, the facts of what it's like to work at Amazon and the human cost that goes into those, you can get your package in a day, convenience. Now they've heard from people and they know how hard it is and how degrading and dehumanizing that job can be because Jeff Bezos is allowed to do basically whatever he wants. They also saw what can happen when you work collectively with your coworkers and you stand up and say, this ain't gonna fly. Like, this isn't okay. We need to do something. I think it will be hugely inspirational for people. I know that the union has already gotten phone calls and messages from over 1,000 workers across the country asking, how can we get in on this? And I think the fact that, they got slapped down in this particular fight, that doesn't mean that's the end of the line. It just means that the next one will be even bigger, and the next one after that will be even bigger. It's not a straight line. It's kind of a winding path. And this is a big stop on the side of the road, but we're going to keep going forward. And the workers I talked to down there, like, they're not giving up. They're not discouraged. Twitter was absolutely inundated with hot takes and a lot of mourning and scorning as that was all going down. But the people, like, I was in Birmingham last weekend and people were just like, yeah, I was disappointed. I was sad, but my coworkers still need me. Like, people across the country still need us to do this. So we're just going to have to keep going. Like, you can't give up. And I think people who are working in warehouses now and see this, if this group of workers in Bessemer, Alabama could get this far against Amazon, farther than anyone's ever gotten, that just means that hopefully someone else watching will be like, oh, well, then maybe we can finish the job. Maybe we can build on what they built here. I think it's not an end, it's a beginning. And I think that's something that's really important to emphasize.
Oh, Kim, thank you so much. Where can our listeners follow along with updates on this story and other labor-related stories?
Well, I'm going to keep covering it. I'm freelance, so I'm kind of all over the place, but you can always find me on Twitter at @GrimKim. And there are a lot of really great labor reporters who've been reporting on it. I think we're going to keep hearing about this. And I really hope, as a media person, as a union person, that the amount of media attention that was trained on this in the beginning and during the election, I hope that is sustained and people keep paying attention, because this shit ain't over and we can't let Amazon win.
Mm-hmm. Kim Kelly, thank you so much. We can't wait to have you back and have you explain the next phase of this story. Hopefully we have some better immediate news then.
Cross fingers,